Makali Mulu is the MP for Kitui Central. He joins us in the studio alongside Maggie, the CEO of TIFA Research. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you in the show. Mheshimiwa, karibu sana. That is the hottest seat.
Yes.
We've given Maggie the warmer one.
I wish you exchanged them.
I'm happy here.
Happy to be in this show for the first time.
Karibu sana.
Yeah,
Good to have you here.
yeah, thank you.
Maggie, good to have you on the show, live in studio. We've had you virtually before.
Yeah, this is a much better experience.
It is, right?
Yeah, than virtual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And happy Valentine's to both of you.
Happy Valentine to
Happy
you.
Valentine's.
City said, don't give him those things, those stories. No. No, we're not. So we're here because we want to talk about polling, and we see these all the time. But before we get there, let's first of all get to understand TIFA Research. What is it that you do?
We are a market research company. Essentially, what that means is that we collect data, we analyze it, and that data is used by our clients to solve problems. In the current season, we're also doing opinion polls, political opinion polls, and publishing them, basically to allow the public, politicians to consume them and use them for decision making.
So who's your audience?
For opinion polling.
Yeah, for the opinion poll.
It's the public, they are Kenyans. But we see that the general public who are voters would consume the information and say, okay, how is my candidate doing? The politicians consume the data, but sometimes you go on microphones and say, Apana, that opinion poll is not right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a diverse audience. We're also seeing donors are consuming the data because they want to see how is the election going to be like. Investors want to see is Kenya going to be stable or not. So opinion polls are being consumed by quite a number of people for various reasons.
Right. Mheshimiwa Makali, you sit in the Parliamentary Committee on Research and Education.
No, I sit in budget.
Budget now.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I do chair a caucus on evidence-informed decision-making and policy.
Evidence-informed decision-making.
which
and
means
policy.
we use data.
Which means you to use a lot of data.
Data, yeah.
Now, when it comes to opinion polling during election and election campaigns,
Yes.
do you feel as if like it reflects the actual situation on the ground?
At times not.
Why?
Other than just being a politician, my background is actually, I'm an economist, my PhD in economics. So I've done a lot of research work. And as Madam Ireri is saying, what determines the results of any opinion polling or any research is the methodology you use. So one of the things which has been, to some extent, we are not sure of the results coming out there, is that at times you see a study conducted, one opinion polling conducted in a month. After 2 weeks, another one is conducted, and they give us totally different results. And you wonder, for example, you saw the other one, which within 2 weeks, one was saying Honorable Luto was leading in terms of presidential race. Within 2 weeks, Honorable Raila is leading, and the party presidents are changing. And you ask yourself, what is happening? Because generally, let me just break this into simple.
Yes.
Anytime you conduct a poll, you don't interview every Kenyan. You interview a smaller number of Kenyans, which means you sample.
Right.
And I'm sure really is on top of that. So whatever you sample, it means it should be a representation of the total population. And studies and academicians have confirmed that if you do proper sampling, the results should not be very different depending on what levels of confidence interval. At times we'll allow some margin of error. That's what we call confidence of margin of error. So if you are sampling from the same Kenyans and you do a proper sampling following the right methodology, you don't expect those results to be so different. So the reason I'm saying I'm not very sure is, you people in the media and print media, you only give us the final result. You don't tell us how some of these things have been arrived at. And anytime you question the methodology, anytime we say we want to see the methodology, then you find there's a lot of resistance from the ireri and the others.
Why is there resistance? I mean, is that
a lot
true?
of
I
resistance.
actually
Maggie, is
disagree.
that true?
And
why is
disagree
there
with that.
resistance?
I disagree the last
and I think
statement.
that's why your earlier question makes sense. Are they cooked at times? Because you know the thing is, we are Kenyans and we live in this country. Kenya is our country. We know at times there are also interests. It really is a political. At the end of the day, she has a vote like me, and she has also her own interest in terms of who do I vote. If you ask her, she can tell you I vote so and so. I know you, as an individual, you are separate from your organization because organization is bigger. But I'm saying there are some. I can tell you I've been in this game also before I joined politics, and she knows. Times she used to be my client. So we've conducted serious service in this country, and we know some of the farms. You can't vouch for them in terms of methodology.
Maggie?
Okay. First, I just want to say I agree with him to some extent and disagree. Let me start with the level of agreement. When polls are published from different companies, it is a fact that in the recent times, there have been different results. I don't dispute that. But what I'd like to say is that every company has a responsibility to use a proper methodology. And the methodology that has to be used has to be very scientific to ensure that the sampling is done properly. If that happens, then ideally the results that are presented should be ideal. We as a company, I represent TIFA, use a very scientific methodology, so I would stand with my results. Now, over the last few months or years, we've seen a lot of research agencies coming up purporting to publish polls. Some of them are even taking very large sample sizes, like 20,000, 30,000 respondents, and saying that they've done a poll. If you're to do a sample size of 30,000 respondents in Kenya, you probably need about 20 million to collect that data. You look at the company that is publishing the polls, they don't even have a website. So I think it is true there are agencies that are actually publishing the wrong results. However, I'd like to disagree with Honorable Makali in terms of I, as an individual, I have a vote, and therefore I'm likely to be biased when I'm doing research. That is totally wrong. We follow a science, and the way the science is followed, it is impossible to say that I, as Maggie, will then decide to change the data to suit a particular candidate. That does not happen. From the time you're collecting the data, from analyzing, from quality control, the chain of quality control is so long, and the number of stakeholders involved are quite a number. So it is impossible in my company to change the results. Okay. Now, how will I vote? Let me finish with how will I vote. Yeah. I actually will vote in the election as per my last opinion poll because I believe in it. If there are two front runners and one front runner is leading, as per my opinion poll, I will align with the opinion poll because I believe the methodology is very, very scientific.
You've said and I think you've given now, you've said in my company. Now, does that mean that there are other companies out there who are releasing information? Because we already know, even as we're talking about the significance, that there are people who follow the polls just like you do, and you say you will vote based on what the poll has said. Now, there are people who will make a choice based on a poll that they have seen. So, are there companies out there who are releasing erroneous information, or are they releasing information for money?
So, there are companies whose credibility I would like to say is questionable. The company that I work for, we are members of the Market and Social Research Association. By being members of that association, we adhere to certain guidelines. Some of those companies are not even members. And we've seen an opinion poll published today. Somebody complains. The next day they pull it down from their website and they change the results. So there are those companies that are strange. And I would like to encourage Kenyans, if you're going to look at results from credible companies. Now, you've asked me another question. Do opinion polls influence the voter choices? Because if there's an opinion poll that is published, is it going to influence my voter choice? What you've seen over the last few years, and here I'm talking about from about 2007 to date, we've been polling, opinion polls do not necessarily influence voter choices, because that's what you call the bandwagon effect, where you see that somebody's leading, and because they're leading, then I as a voter decide I'm not going to vote for my person who's number 3 and I go with number 1. They don't necessarily influence voter choices.
And actually the reason why they don't is what I said earlier. You know, for example, if you look at countries like America, opinion polling is taken seriously, and you see that done very regularly just as you approach elections. And, you know, Madam Ireri used to work for Steadman. And you remember those days of Steadman, people used to take opinion polling very seriously. because we'll have subjected the methodology to serious interrogation. We'll have looked at the methodology. Because, opinion polling, where it is correctly done, there are 4 things it does, which is very important. One, it is able to tell you as a politician, where are you, or as a party, where are you in terms of national ranking. On the basis of that, you can be able to craft your messaging so that you improve your ranking. At the same time, at times they would put a question there which would indicate why are people not happy with you as an individual or as your party or a coalition. And on the basis of that particular question, then you'll be able to see what Kenyans are saying, that we are not happy with this, we are not happy with this. For example, this morning, so in the Standard, there's the issue of Kenyans saying 6 things which make voters unhappy in the country. Unemployment, corruption, poverty levels. So that when you craft your manifesto then, you tailor your manifesto to that point. So actually where it is correctly done, it's a very important tool to inform decision making, to inform your strategies, and at the end of the day, you're able to improve your rating. But the challenge we have is what she's saying. There are some farms in this country, and these are, unfortunately, they are the majority. Unfortunately, they are the majority. Us as politicians, there's also this rating of MPs all over the place. You see, all over the place, and the reason why we know they are not genuine is because you will get a call, somebody telling you we are about to release some resources, some results, and from the way things are, you are at the bottom there. We can discuss how we bring you up to the top.
You can now release some resources.
So you see, this is what I'm saying. And me as a profession in that line, forget about me being a politician. Anytime you call someone to say we have results, we can change, then automatically it says there's a problem.
Yeah.
But there are some farms actually which you can forge for, and but for me, I always say, send me your methodology. I need to look at it, because once you send me your methodology, it's just a simple garbage in, garbage out. So once I look at your methodology, I'll tell you this one, you can rely on them. And the problem is also the sample size. As she's saying, since you can't interview everybody in Kenya, you need to sample a few. But even in sampling, you need to be also smart. For example, you can't just do a survey where you interview all women only and you say you have a good survey. You need to cluster the population. We have the youth, we have disabled, we have women, we have men, we have different regions. So your survey must also be representative in terms of the national appeal. And that's what I'm saying, really. Looking at the methodology, you'll be able to say. But we're not saying they are not important. They help in decision making. But I think we need to do a bit of work in terms of integrity of some of the farms.
There are those who argue that you can more or less predetermine results depending on the methodology you use, your sample sizing, your analysis, that you can purpose it. What are your opinions on this?
That's what we'd call biasing the research. So it is possible, as Honorable Makali said, to bias your results based on the sampling. If you skew your sampling to a particular area, and that geographical area has the one candidate receives higher support, definitely there'll be a problem. There's also a standard way of asking questions for opinion polling, and these are global standards. A researcher may decide maybe to ask the question in a way that it's prompting the respondent to give the wrong answer. So it is possible, but again, I say it depends on the professionalism of the researcher. And if you're a member of the Market and Social Research Association, we've harmonized the questions, meaning that the question is asked in the same way all the time. We've harmonized the methodology. So adhering to the standards then means that you don't bias the outcome of the results.
But maybe also to add, I think that question is very important. Also when you're doing sampling, there's what we call non-probability sampling and probability sampling. If you go for probability sampling, you give every individual in that sample an equal chance. Now, non-probability is like what you're saying, purposive. We call it purposive sampling. You can actually purpose to sample a particular group, which means then you eliminate the issue of equal chance. And that's what she's saying, then you bias it. Because in that case, then you are targeting a particular group to interview, not everybody. But if you go for probability sampling, then it means everybody in that particular sample will have an equal chance of being sampled. So you can't pick you or me it means then we have equal chance. But purposive, then you're basically saying, I purpose to interview this particular individuals. On the basis of that, my sample then, you will have actually biased the whole process. But then depends on what results you expect. And in most cases, then you don't do opinion polling, you don't do purposive sampling. No, because you have to give everybody an equal chance to be able to say what they want.
Let me just add. So let me give an example. Let's say I go to, we do a lot of household sampling. Let's say I go to, I select the household randomly. When I go to the house, I look for people who are aged 18 plus, assuming they're 10 or 5. The question is, how do you select one person in that household to be selected? Because I don't want to say, I want to interview you because I found you in the house, or maybe you look like you're more able to answer questions. So these are way of selecting even the respondent randomly at the household level to ensure that there's no bias.
The issue of opinion polling, especially during elections and around elections, has been debated in Parliament. And there was a whole conversation even on regulating opinion polls, by what time, close to an election, an opinion poll cannot be released. There was even a question of even seeing which companies are being allowed to conduct and release results of opinion polling. How far did that go?
Actually, that debate was in the House after some rating of members of Parliament was released. And we discovered that the firm which was releasing those results, the CEO is a wife to one of the members of Parliament. So the wife had given the husband very high rating there, and anybody who was a friend to the husband was also up there. And it went out there publicly. So
family and friends
discussed, and automatically what I was saying earlier, more likely there was exchange of funds. so this is what we are saying. So members of Parliament were saying we need to be very careful, because the thing is, this is a perception. And seriously, when people are told out there that so and so is rating number 1, and it's not real, is people who have just doctored the figures, then you are misleading the voters. And I think really that's why we were saying then we need to come up with a law which can regulate. And more so, actually we were saying, I remember I convened that debate, and we were saying, let's not even think about blocking everybody, but let's demand that before an opinion polling is done, let that methodology be made public, so that you and me can look at it. You can publish it the way you publish the results, so that those who are experts in that area can look at the methodology, and then we derogate it. Critically, we say that it makes sense, it doesn't make sense.
And this is before the
polling
commences.
the polling, before the results are released.
Okay.
Because once you push your methodology, I see it, and we are convinced the right methodology, then we will be able to say, okay, let's now get the results. But what is happening is that I think a lady will agree with me, because of the kind of money exchanging hands. There are some people who have come up there. They're not even professionals. You ask somebody, what is your background? Somebody has not even done the statistics to bachelor's level. They left statistics at Form 4. And then they tell you, I'm the expert in that area. And the lady can tell you, this is a serious business. I'm telling you, preparing for a serious opinion polling requires a lot of brains. More so the methodology. She called it scientific. It's a scientific way of doing it. It's just not casually. But now some of them are doing so casually.
So should it be regulated?
It should. Basically, if we had, I think if we had the right people to do quality assurance, if we had either the right organization, she's saying, there's an organization you join. For example, if you're an accountant, once you're a member of ISPAC,
Yes.
then they do the quality control.
Yes.
The challenge we have in this sector, we don't have an equal of an ISPAC, which controls other than internationally.
They only have a
and
club.
if they are there, then you join.
Maggie is looking at you like, no, we have.
The thing is, there are international levels where they join.
Yes.
But if you are not a member of it, then we should be saying, if you are not a member of this organization,
then you
don't
shouldn't
practice.
practice.
The way we say, if you're an accountant and you are not registered with the ISPAC,
You don't have
or you don't have a letter saying
practicing certificate.
you are cleared by ISPAC, you don't practice. With them, there are those who are practicing without being really serious members of those organizations.
Let me just say something about the regulation. There's already an Electoral Opinion Polls Act that was passed quite a number of years ago. It does stipulate how opinion polls should be published, including the methodology and all the demographics that needs to be communicated at the point of publishing an opinion poll. It even goes to say that no opinion poll should be published within less than 7 days before an election. So there's a law. But also, I want to throw it back to the team here. The media. the media does
Not gonna
receive
escape
that does receive these opinion polls and then
They
does
publish.
not interrogate. They publish. And when they publish, now you guys come back to us and ask us why are you doing the wrong thing? Now, if the media could make a decision and say, these are what is our criteria for a credible company? It's that information is out there, collaborating with the polling agency association, deciding on how to publish the methodology. I know quite a number of media houses, and I also believe like the Standard Media House here has also made a decision on whether to publish opinion polls or not. But I think the media also is part of this conversation and needs to play a role in ensuring that opinion polls that are not credible are not published.
May I call you Maggie?
Yes, feel free.
Maggie, there's something you mentioned, and in my opinion, it actually gets to the heart of the matter. You can have standards. You can have even an act. You can be part and parcel of an organization that regulates. But if the individuals involved do not have integrity, at some level, in my opinion, it boils down to the individuals who are there, because that's what research is all about. All these things are in place and everybody knows the standards. And then why do we have problems? Because the individuals involved. Some of the scandals that have rocked the planet and even this country have had to do with accounting firms. Not small accounting firms, big accounting firms who are part of these organizations that are supposed to regulate. And you wonder, how did these things fall through the cracks? How did this happen? So even if you belong to an organization such as the one that you say, even if we have an act, but the individuals who are involved do not have the integrity that is required, at every stage, even with the correct methodology, that particular outcome can be influenced. This is really what I'm saying.
No, we can't agree more. You know, the thing is, integrity in this country is a very rare commodity. In this country, it's a very rare commodity. So you might have to make many rounds before you come across it. But we can't agree more. Really, the thing is, if you are serious researcher, you really need to go by what the results are. You know, you don't change the results to suit your interest. You should allow the results to talk the way they are. So that this is what is there, is the reality. We agree with it, and on the basis of that, make decisions. We can't agree more.
With us in the studio this morning, the Honorable Makali Mulu, the MP for Kitui Central, and Maggie Ireri, the CEO of TIFA Research. We're talking about the significance of polling during elections. As we were going to the break, Mheshimiwa, you talked about, credibility of the polling stations and the pollsters, and you said it's important to have some self-regulating body, like we have lawyers, accountants, engineers, and all. And Maggie, you said, yes, there is a polling agency association, but is it really strong enough to do that self-regulation? Does it do it?
What the association has done, and I want to basically say it's a good thing they've done. They've come up with standards. They've even recommend the sample size that should be done. They brought us together as researchers, and we've harmonized our questionnaires. So in terms of setting the standards and providing guidance in the best way possible, I think the Market and Research Association, which is MSRA, has done a fantastic job. Now, in terms of policing pollsters, especially the ones that are not doing a good job, to some extent, I would say not very well, but perhaps it's an issue of scope and resources. Because some of the agencies that are perhaps not doing a good job are not members, and also it would require a lot of resources to go out and check on them. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would actually give them a 7, meaning that there is room for improvement. And I, being a member of the Market and Social Research Association, would work with the members to ensure this is done.
Okay. We're looking at the significance of polling, and there's a comment that you made, Maggie, said, well, it's not necessarily that would members of the public look at the results of the poll and then make a decision on how they would vote. But for politicians, Mheshimiwa, it is very important to hear where you are in terms of positioning, to hear where you are in terms of the opinions of the members of public around you. So politicians being actors in an electoral process, the other side of it are those who are going to vote, who are also part of this electoral process. So the significance of polling on the decisions that the electorate will make, then, for me, Is this based on some of these results, or is it just information that's floating out there? How significant then is polling for the half of those in the process that are going to make the decision at the vote, at the ballot?
So, the question is, if I see as a voter, if I see an opinion poll, does it influence my vote? And I just want to give an example. And this happened, I think, in the election of 2007, where there was Kalonzo on the ballot box, and there was Kibaki and so on, and Raila Odinga. Consistently, the polls were showing that Kalonzo would get 10% for the presidency. And when the ECK results came out after the election, he had 9%. So what happened is that we decided to check what was the case. So my colleague, Dr. Tom Wolf, traveled to Machakos and Ukambaniland, and he was doing some qualitative research, and he was asking people, did you see the opinion polls that were published by the company then? Yes. What percentage was given to your candidate? They'd say, yeah, our candidate was getting about 10%. And then, did it change how you voted? And the answer was no. And he asked them why. He said, although he was getting 10%, we wanted to vote for him because even though he doesn't become president now, he could be a key person in another election. And if you realize after that election, Kibaki needed an ally. Who did he go for? He went for the 10% guy.
10%.
Yes. So what am I saying is opinion polls do not necessarily change the voting behavior. In fact, there are people who decide, I want to vote for this person and I will stick to it. So that's one example. Let me give you another one. Another example is in this, I think 2013 election, you had Martha Karua, Peter Kenneth,
Salim Mudavadi.
all those guys. There was one candidate who was voted for even higher than Peter Kenneth,
And Martha
Karua, and that was Dida. You remember him?
Yeah.
He actually got more votes than the other people. So I think at that point, Kenyans just decided, there's too much circus here. Let me go and vote for this particular person. But where voters are really, really passionate about a candidate, they're unlikely to change their vote. But the Dida example was a lot of maybe then decided Kenyans who said, you know what, this election.
Did you actually do a research on that, on why Dida got the votes?
Yes.
And what was the reason?
The reason was that the choices available to them were not making sense. And they decided, you know what? And this was mainly the undecided voters. They decided, since I cannot make a decision, why don't I just vote for this person?
Prior to the election, Maggie, was the undecided vote that high?
Okay, what we're saying...
Such that you can say that, there was this high percentage of undecided voters, and then you can directly translate and say, we can see them then going to Abduba Dida.
Okay, so usually, if you look at the candidate A and number 1 and 2, their percentages did not vary. Then you had, when we were doing the polls, we had percentages for Martha Karua, for Peter Kenneth, and undecided. When you look at the numbers that moved from those 3 categories to Dida, they were equal. So if you, let's say, 2% off Peter Kenneth, 3% off Martha Karua, and then they're decided maybe reduced by a certain percent, they actually went to Dida. But you can see they were moving not from very strong candidates to a candidate who was probably not very strong either.
The period you mentioned, the 2007-2008, prior to Kalonzo getting that 10%, the time Kalonzo was leading in the polls, literally leading everyone.
Yes.
So how did that come about, and what brought about the dip? Because the dip was just as significant as the
Dropped
rise.
to 10.
Yes, he was leading. I mean, he was ahead.
You know what would happen? That's why I said actually, if the results are very genuine, you can easily change the story. After he was leading for some time, the other candidates went out there and started campaigning. And when you are down there, then you need to campaign to improve your rating. And basically, that's what the polls now become very important. They can inform your strategy in terms of how you campaign. But if you look at Dida, what happened is, there was a presidential debate just a few weeks to the election. And we all agree, because I watched it. The guy did quite well. He
represented himself very well.
He presented himself very well. And as a result of that, the Kenyans who are not decided, and then Kenyans who are looking for a leader who could just provide what they want, I think they saw it in Dida. So that presidential debate really also helped him to get more votes. But I think what is happening basically is, because of the things we are discussing here, there's a lot of brushing off of the results. When they are released, Kenyans, we are used to this. These are just being cooked from somewhere. So that's what I was saying. For me, if we improve the credibility of the results, they can actually inform voting.
So then maybe a secondary question would be,
yes.
what significance then do these polls hold for the electorate?
Not much now, I can tell you for sure, because what is happening, you know, Kenyan politics by nature are tribal and regional. And unless we break that pattern, then that's why you find opinion polling always remains at the back there, because anytime they are list, you see, like now, when you release Raila as a result showing he's leading, we say, we know that farm, they work for him. When you release Ruto's leading, we say, we know that. So at the end of the day, the results are just taken very casually.
Sure.
And I wish we were in a situation where, to me, I think that's where the issue of quality control and regulation becomes very important. And I think the government is also failing us. Because I think if the market cannot regulate themselves, then the government would come with a minimum requirements that for you to be in this sector, we require a farm to do 1, 2, 3. And if possible, also do a bit of licensing, so that as you license, there are minimum requirements to make sure that the people who are in that sector are people who because we need these results, by the way, they're very important. We need them.
Mheshimiwa, let me give you a parallel example to what you're saying. Yeah? There's a spiritual industry called preaching. Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, it is an industry.
Yes.
And it's a growth one. And there have been various discussions about what should be the minimum requirement for someone to present themselves as a purveyor of the good news. Okay? It's an ongoing debate. But this particular industry influences the lives of very many people, whether you like it or not. And more so, when a country is going through hardship, the importance increases because they offer you something that relieves some of the pressures and pains that everyday life affords you. Okay? Now, that was just a by the way. What I really want to ask is this. When you formulate questions for polling, okay, what is it that you take into consideration regarding the response that you will receive, knowing Kenyans as we do? Because what you ask and what they understand you to be asking and what they think they ought to tell you determine what you get. How then do you ensure that the information that you actually gather is representative of what you wanted to actually collect?
Okay, so let me not talk about sampling because you already covered that. So we're talking about the questioning and how the data is collected. Number one, we've already have the standard ways of asking these questions, and they've already been tested and tried to be ideal.
Where were they tested?
They were tested in Kenya.
Okay.
Yes, we've tested in Kenya. Does this question, is it misleading? Is it biased? And so on.
And the sample sizing, was it random? Or how did you go about this testing?
But then we've been doing this testing. We've been polling from, I think, 2000. So we've gone through series of asking many questions. If I was to look at all the sample sizes that we've done over the last 3 years, it could be over 20,000 respondents.
Good.
Now, once you do that, there's also what you call translations. I cannot ask you a question if you don't understand the language that I'm speaking. So the questionnaires are translated, and even the translations are checked whether they make sense. Now, after that, the researcher, especially on the key question, evaluations are to be held today, who do you vote for? It is a rule that we should not prompt the respondents with names. That is a standard. And the other thing we do also as an agency, and this is also for quality control, because the interviews are recorded, whether I'm doing it telephonically or I'm doing it face-to-face. You hear the researcher asking the question, and you confirm that the question was asked in the best way possible. Then you hear the respondent answering. And from our server, because the information is streaming in live, you check how the question was asked, how the response was given. Then also right now what has happened is that agencies are using what you call collecting data using a mobile app. So our researchers have an app on their phone and they go to a particular area. You're even able to check the GPS coordinates of where that interview was done and confirm that it was done in the right sampling point to ensure that the sample was well distributed across the country. Now, with those quality controls, at least you're able to say to a certain degree that you have done a good job and a professional job, and there's no bias in the data collection.
In the collection, so what percentage you give the margin of error?
The margin of error is dependent on the sample size. So right now, for a national sample, we're taking a sample size of 1,500. Margin of error is plus or minus 2.7%, which I'd round it off to 3%. So, and again, by the way, quantity, you can end up with a sample size of 10,000. and I can have a sample size of 1,500. Now, if the sampling is done very well for both, the results will be
They
the
give you
same.
the same results.
Yes. The issue is how, it's not the quantity, it's the quality of your sampling.
But on the question of the questionnaire, I think questionnaire development is also a skill, you know. So there are people who develop the first draft, then you have teams to discuss and agree on some of these things. So because you don't just write and push it to the respondent, there must be some technical work which goes into it in terms of design, so that you get the right questions which are neutral. You don't bias the respondent in terms of answering. And I think that's what you're really saying, that before you go out there, this question will be subject to serious debate, discussion, so that you get the good question. There's also pilot testing where you do with a few people just to confirm that the respondents are what you expect in terms of neutrality, in terms of being clear, and all those things.
Right. Well, previously you had mentioned, countries where polling is taken extremely seriously.
Serious, yeah.
Like the US, for example, we see that there are media polls, there are independent polls, there are, so many. And this is something that's actually then consumed by the public, that people are going to ask questions, all right, closer to the election. What are the polls saying? Because then we can see that the decision could be altered or fueled by the results of a particular poll. How do you think they got to that point where they developed it so much so that it can be depended upon to then make a decision? In this case, a lot of times rubbished by politicians sometimes, and say, well, look, how can this poll from this particular company or media house said this one, this thing, and this other one said, I'm going to go with that, obviously for, self-expediency. Why do they then, why have they gotten to the point whereby they almost believe in it like a second religion?
The first thing is doing it over time, and the results of the polling becoming a reality when the results are announced. That, for example, we say, like you said, so-and-so will get 10%. When the results are announced, you're just around that, with the allowed margin of error. If that is done over time, then people will trust it. And the second thing is the issue of integrity. As we said, integrity as a value is something which is lacking in most of the developing world. But those countries you're talking about, people will do the right thing, irrespective of who gets hurt by that decision. So they will say, this is the position. And there's nothing like calling somebody after you've done your results are published without calling anybody or talking to anybody.
But then we've also talked about the Bradley effect.
Yes.
And whether people will actually get to a point where they feel the pressure coming from opinion pollsters and they see, let me just give you the answer that you seem to be wanting. And so we can move on.
Yeah.
Does that play a part here?
I think that was, if you remember when Trump first got elected,
Yep.
I think that was in 2016, yeah?
Yeah, 2016.
And the way the US was doing opinion poll, then it's either an online or an IVR. It's an automated voice response. They call you and they say, if you're going to vote for Trump, press 1, etc., etc. So what they found out, that whatever they predicted was actually slightly different from the actual election outcome. And the Bradley effect came in such a way that in various ways, number one, Trump supporters were not participating in the opinion polls. So they'd get called, they would say no. Now, some of them, especially women, lied that they were supporting another candidate. Because you remember Trump had
The
a
opponent
lot
was
of
a woman.
issues. Also, the way he was talking about women was a big issue. So it happened that the pollsters did not factor in all those issues. And eventually, you had outcomes that were different. Now, how do you counter that? Ideally, in addition to doing the opinion polls, the quantitative, I know you're calling people, though there could have been room to do a bit of qualitative research. Qualitative research is where you go on the ground, I talk to you, I can tell by your body language, I can tell about the way you're responding. Perhaps you could be giving the wrong information. Now, if I come back to Kenya, we've not had that issue yet. Because I remember, like there are quite a number of elections that have been predicted, right, like by pollsters. Remember the referendum for 2005? Pollsters got it right. I remember we even did an election in Zambia, got it right. I remember we even did an opinion poll in Malindi by-election, we got it right.
Yeah.
So most of the times, the pollsters get it right. But assuming that this issue is raised, I think it's a responsibility of pollsters to say, in addition to doing quantitative research, let's do a bit of qualitative to see whether that effect is there or not. And that, again, the onus is on the professionalism of the pollsters to actually say, let's go beyond the numbers and understand what is happening. But just, sorry, one last thing.
Yeah.
But I'd just like to say, a lot of, although we poll, the results sometimes don't end up being the same. The key thing is voter turnout, because by the time you're polling, you're assuming 100% voter turnout. Number two, there could be a major political event that happens. A last-minute alliance that was done after the last poll was published. So polls are not necessarily bulletproof because there are quite a number of factors that could
But Maggie,
change.
why assume 100% voter turnout when we know that never happens anywhere?
Well, you don't have history of voter.
Nowhere. Except for dictatorships where somebody gets, and even then they don't get 100, they get 97, 98.
But today,
Yes.
are you able to predict the voter turnout across the whole country by regions, by sub-counties, and factor it in the model for opinion polling? Right now, it's impossible.
You can only go from historical
Can only go
behavior.
historical behavior.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask about commissioned polls. Do you get politicians who come and commission a poll? I mean, they just want to understand whether what the issues of the voters are. Do you get such?
Yes, in fact, if I was to look at this year, maybe from mid last year, vis-a-vis the last election cycle, the number of politicians who are doing private polls has increased. And we're seeing that for the seat of governor, MP. Those are the two, I think those are the hottest seats. And they're commissioning polls and using those polls to make a decision. So if I could give you an example, not from this election, but from a previous election, we did a research for a governor, and his ratings were not very high. We did 3 rounds of research. And then in the first round, his rating was actually below 15%. And we analyzed the data by ward and etc. And he was able to tell where he's doing well, where he's doing poorly. He then went to about 10 wards, and then we did another research. And we could see very clearly that in the 10 wards that he had visited and had very customized messages, his numbers went up. So now for the next season, again, he said, these are the issues in these wards. I'm going to go there in person.
Did he win?
Yes.
Yeah, you can actually package
Because
it.
my next question was, did he pay you?
All this one.
No. This was a professional contract, etc. He paid and he won and he's been a 2-term governor now.
Do you see then a direct result of taking that poll information, acting on the information, and then being able to get to a certain point because that information then was given to you? Can you see that traceability and say, actually, you know what? This information, data collected, then I can act on it?
Yes, it's very actionable. And also, I'd like to say, even for a governor candidate, not only is he finding out about himself, he's finding about the senatorial seat, women rep, and the MP seat. So he even knows if he's going to a particular constituency, is he going to hang out with Honorable Makali, or because he's ranked number 1, or is he going to campaign with number 2? So, to be honest, in this year, I have seen the highest usage of data, interrogation, discussion, and also the data informing campaign strategy.
And actually, it's going to be even much more as we approach the elections. You know why? This year, unlike other years, nominations are going to be very, very tricky. They are going to be a big challenge, and more so open nominations. So what parties are going to do? They are going to use actually scientific opinion polling to determine which areas, who is popular where, in terms of now issuing the party certificates. That is going to be very common this year. Because you've realized now, with these coalitions, so many parties are coming together, and then you don't know who is who. You want to give your ticket to who, and on the basis of that. So we'll be running to Madam Maggie to do that, and then tell the parties who is more popular and who is likely to win. Then on the basis of that, we call it proper targeting, so that you don't miss that seat. Because parties are now looking for more members in parliament as a party. So there's going to be quite a lot of work now in terms of opinion polling. But no, unlike the other one, this one is more tailored. You can't bias it, because I'm telling you, I want to know the truth, and I'm paying for that. So you must give me the truth.
You're the consumer of this, not the
so that
public.
when I'm looking at the results, I can know where I'm weak, where I'm strong, and then package my messaging, other strategy accordingly, so that I win the seat.
Yeah. And so, Maggie, when a client like that has come to you once, twice, thrice, and now you're doing a general county opinion polling, are you likely to favor them?
Okay.
When you're now looking at the popularity of governors and various, or the popularity of candidates in the election.
Definitely not. In fact, let me give an example. There's one particular candidate we did for research. This was for an MP seat. He was polling poorly, extremely poorly. He was only number 3. He was like number 7. And we had a discussion with him and said, these results are not favoring you. Either work hard or you pull out. He pulled out. So we don't change our data. So let me come back to your question. So assuming I was to do a survey that is touching on that county, and perhaps this has been my client before, would I change the results? Definitely not. Because as a professional, it is my responsibility to say the truth and publish the right information.
Okay.
Of the number of times when you conduct polls, what percentage of times would you say you get it wrong?
That is a very that's a tricky question.
Huh?
Yeah,
that's
a tricky question.
Let's conclude the conversation. On that note, we want to thank you very much for joining us. The Honorable Makali Mulu, MP for Kitui Central Constituency, and Maggie, ireri, the CEO of TIFA Research. We've been talking about polls, and John has conducted a poll as we were having the conversation, our producer. On social media, on YouTube specifically, do you trust opinion polls during elections? 72% no, yes, 27%. Mheshimiwa, ask him.
The sampling is biased. Sampling is biased.
Interrogate the results.
Now interrogate the results.
We need to know the demographics, where they're coming from and everything, and how the question was asked.
Thank you very much for tuning in. Keep it right here. More conversations coming up in the next hour. Very good morning to you.